Any changes with respect to the decriminalization of drugs and controlled substances could affect the number of persons arrested, convicted, sentenced, and incarcerated, thereby potentially reducing demand for correctional facilities to house them. Similarly, reductions in crime rates could lead to reductions in arrests, convictions, and sentences requiring incarceration in correctional facilities. Immigration reform laws, which are currently a focus for legislators and politicians at the federal, state, and local level, also could materially adversely impact us.
By the people who are most impacted, who's more impacted than the folks who have to do the early side? And so we're saying that the movement looks different when the people who have experienced it determine what has to happen, how it has to happen, when it has to happen.
When CCA first began operating private prisons in the mid-1980s, one of his first projects while I was building one of his prisons was to house prisoners in a motel. And they surrounded it with barbed wire and they put bars up on the windows. And the prisoners housed there quickly found out that they could push the air conditioners out of the walls and just climb through the hole and escape. So it's in such beginnings that today's huge multi-billion-dollar private prison industry sprung. This is where it came from. 10 years ago, our prison population was around 1.5 million. We've added another 1 million people to that in the last decade. What this created was a market opportunity. In our capitalistic, free economy, free market society, it's an opportunity to make money. And the private prison companies that were formed in the mid-1980s capitalized on that. They saw it as an opportunity to expand, and the industry expanded by developing other companies. Other players started joining. You had Cornell Corrections, you had Correctional Services Corporation, MTC, Civigenics, Emerald Group. You had a wide number of prison operators join into this industry because it was very profitable. States needed somewhere to put all these excess prisoners. You have for-profit medical care in prisons through companies like Prison Health Services, PHS, and Correctional Medical Services, CMS. And you had prisoner transportation services, where they would shuttle prisoners all around the country to different facilities, detainers and so forth, through TransCorp, which is a subsidiary of CCA, Correctional Corporation of America. You had the expansion to juvenile detention services through Youth Services International and the Abraxas Group, and a variety of others. You had an expansion to prison food services through Aramark, Canteen Services, Sodexo Marriott. This profitable heyday for CCA and other private prison companies, but particularly CCA, suffered a major downturn in 2000-2001. And that's when the company embarked on a convoluted, misguided scheme to create a separate entity, the Prison Realty Trust, and then it would own the company's private prisons and lease them back to CCA to operate. It was kind of a financial tax kind of thing where they figured it would ultimately benefit the company, which didn't work out too well. So the scheme failed terribly. The company's executives were all replaced. CCA's stock dropped to under 20 cents a share. The company teetered on bankruptcy. Shareholders filed $100 million shareholder suits. And what happens next will be Judy's job to explain.
Right, the immigrant gold rush. When the population, when the state population was beginning to level off, they had 10,000 empty beds, either online, sitting there empty, or about to come online. Then the Federal Bureau of Prisons started putting out RFPs over 99, 2000, 2001, adding up to roughly 10,000 beds. By 2006, The immigrant gold rush market, the immigration bed, detention bed market had superheated to the point where there was an explosion in detention capacity. And 2006 saw the beginning of these workplace dragnets, these sweeps that were saying. The Swift and Company, December 12th, 2006, involved more than 1,000 federal enforcement officers and resulted in 1,282 arrests of immigrants. And since that time, this operation has really heated up, so that now if you're watching, if you subscribe to the Detention Watch Network listserv, for example, you'll notice that those kinds of sweeps are happening on a weekly basis, and in some places a daily basis.
The biggest three companies are publicly traded on the stock exchange, that there was a way that we could target there's a way that we could target their shareholders and sort of hold them accountable and say that if you're going to invest in these private prison firms, that you're going to be, that you're going to have campaigns run against you. And so when I got involved in this, it was sort of the tail end of this campaign against Sodexo Marriott, where students around the country, Sodexo Marriott was owned by a parent company called Sodexo Alliance, which was a big French multinational firm that at the time was the largest single shareholder in Corrections Corporation of America. So through, I think, Kevin and Judy and Beva sort of planning on this, they, the idea was, well, Sodexo Marriott also has contracts to operate food services at a lot of universities and high schools and different places around the country. There was this concerted effort at dozens, probably 50 or 100 campuses across the country to cut contracts with Sodexo Marriott because of this relationship with the Corrections Corporation of America. And it ended up being very successful. There were sit-ins around the country. There were several contracts that were cut because of this relationship. And I think that it really sort of galvanized a university audience that typically wasn't engaged in a lot of ways in a fight around criminal justice issues. And it ended up in the spring of 2001. We at the University of Texas, we were, gung-ho about it. We just done our sit-in. We were ready to, do something else. And then 2 days later, Sodexo Marriott dumped all of their shares in Corrections Corporation of America, right? And I think that there was a campaign against an investment bank called Fairlawn Capital Management that at that time was also the largest shareholder in a campaign against Lehman Brothers for several years, which is a big financial backer of the private prison industry. Right? There's a whole series of corporations that all they do is design and build prisons, right? And that I think that there are some really interesting campaigns that could come out of a conference like this about how we target some of those the sort of financial underpinnings of the private prison industry. So one of the things that we're trying to do is organize a national campaign to end the practice of family detention, so that they can't just move into a CCA facility in Tennessee or an MTC facility in Ravenville, Texas.